One thing I always say is anybody that has gone through a period of starvation and has unfortunately passed on in life through the history books has not been overweight. It's just a fact.
Actually, if you weren't aware of your health, you would probably be playing with fire.
When we go to a doctor, we're given an appointment slot. It's like 20 minutes. You go in, they go through a piece of paper, they'll go through your signs and symptoms, and they'll just prescribe the birth control. Why? Because it masks the underlying root cause, which they're not willing to go into.
When you've got higher cortisol, that's then impacting your ability to be able to absorb nutrients. The lack of nutrient absorption can then lead to a cycle which actually causes estrogen dominance, and that then causes all these symptoms that some of us ladies are dealing with, and we just think, actually, let me take more exogenous hormones because the GP told me, and that's going to fix everything.
You are what you eat, what you absorb, and what you assimilate into your cells.
When it comes to understanding female hormones to the extent that you do and the physiology, how did you get to this point where you are truly a wizard with all your knowledge?
It kind of initiated back years ago. It actually started with my
Shane, why are you here to talk about female hormones?
because I've been invited. Because it's something that needs to be discussed. But the problem is people don't like to hear it from a male.
Why is that the case?
Because my experience is that females generally don't like to hear a male talking about a hormonal related issue if they experience pain off the back of that issue.
That's so interesting. It might not be the same as like specifically like hormonal related issues, but the amount of times that I've had women come to me and say, I just feel like a woman understands, but they're referring to maybe female health condition. Maybe it's, talking about like, oh, this is what PMS is like, and this is what I go through. But as much as you might not exactly feel it, you understand it probably more than most women do. Actually, not probably, definitely.
Yeah, I think a lot of times what I see is, and one explanation that I use a lot with females is I understand the physiology of the human body. I don't understand the pain that you go through, but I understand what initiates that pain. I understand the imbalances that might be there, and we just work on it from there.
Okay, so when it comes to understanding female hormones to the extent that you do and the physiology, how did you get to this point where you are truly a wizard with all your knowledge?
So it kind of initiated back years ago. It actually started with my own father, who was diagnosed with cancer, and I realized that he was not getting the answers that he deserved. And from there, I wanted to understand blood chemistry a lot more in depth so that I could then go through my father's labs and be able to help him. From there, I initially wanted to coach male clients, which I know that you get a lot of males coaches on your podcast. And it just turned out that I got a lot of females coming my way. So from that point, in the moment, I was studying, did a postgraduate in nutritional biochemistry, and then I furthered my education in functional medicine. And between all of that, I was learning a lot about the physiology of the human body, the biochemistry, and what kind of drives specific pathways in the body. And it was from there that, I just got a better understanding. And then obviously talking to more females and understanding their patterns is where the experience came from.
That's incredible. And I can relate a lot to that driving for the why. Like you said, obviously with your father being diagnosed with this health condition, just constantly asking why, because you want to be the problem solver. But actually then when you work with so many women, in this case, with different situations, you just become like an encyclopedia for whatever hormonal issue there might be. And that's what no one else will be able to have, is your experience and your breadth of those situations that you've helped women resolve whatever their struggles have been.
Yeah, for sure. I think as well, like one person that obviously is Marina, and that's how we initially got in touch, was to talk about some blood work that she had, some hormonal related issues that she was struggling with. And yeah, that's, essentially how we met. And then it's just through the years that I ended up connecting with a lot of females. I ended up doing a lot of educational talks, seminars, and webinars for females in corporate settings. And I ended up just getting a lot of female clients at that point. And now it's gotten to a stage where the majority of the females that I have as clients just have a lot of questions that they want answered that they may not have been heard or seen in the past.
That is really nice, because we're talking about Marina, who is your wife. So it's really nice that actually like you being almost like a healer, like you've looked after your dad and then Marina, and also now me, because I sent you my bloods. But I'm excited because you're going to impart a lot of incredible knowledge on any of our female listeners today, and also male listeners, because I think it's also important that they learn some of this, especially if they're in the health and fitness industry. So just to start off with, what are some signs of maybe low progesterone, estrogen dominance that women might be looking out for nowadays because of things being flashed in the headlines?
So I know we spoke about this. It's a good question, and it's one that I always like to touch on. So when we look at signs and symptoms, it's one thing that I don't like to discuss, and the main reason for that
Next
is
question.
next question. No problem. The reason why I don't like to talk about the signs and symptoms is because if I say that somebody will have irritability based on low progesterone, the minute they feel irritable, they will think maybe it's perhaps low progesterone. The minute I say somebody may experience bloating from, or somebody may have high estrogen and they might experience bloating, they all of a sudden feel they have high estrogen. Then they start blaming the hormones when it may be coming from a different reason or may be coming from a different cause. So signs and symptoms of hormonal related issues, high progesterone, low progesterone, high estrogen, low estrogen, can be anything from breast tenderness to irritability to bloating to gas, even things like low thyroid conversion. These are stuff that we can see. But if I say that, somebody's going to say that that's what they have. And that's generally why I don't talk about it.
Okay. So you prefer to have, let's say, a client come to you and say, here's what I'm experiencing. But then how do you know or assign what the true reason is for that? As any of our listeners shouldn't just be thinking, oh, because I'm irritable, I've got low progesterone. No, honey, you just need to take a chill pill. Like, how do you actually know when it is hormonal or if there's something that's not quite good with the baseline health?
So generally I start with a conversation with the person. So if I run a consultation with a female or if I get a female that's been referred to me, I'll have initial conversation with them. I will see everything from their background to their childhood, what their current work life is, what their relationship is like, if they are in a relationship, what their past experiences is, if there's any unresolved trauma or stress in their life that could be driving things like anxiety or things like irritability. And from there, then we will go into blood work. So specifically, when I look at females, we will go through a specific set of bloods, which I've talked to you about. We'll look at it on specific days of their menstrual cycle, and we will take labs from there. Based on those labs, we will go into supplementation, whether it's necessary. Not everybody needs supplements, and I'm not an advocate for people just to be taking supplements blindly. But if it's needed, we will go in there. Then further on from that, we can look further into dried urinary analysis testing, which is a Dutch test, which we can look at the metabolites of hormones as well.
Okay. So in that case, let's say you have someone who's come to you with some symptoms that maybe they're not quite happy with. What they probably might be coming to you to say is, I have maybe gone to my GP, my general practitioner, and they've just told me, okay, take this birth control or take this contraception. But maybe there's someone, obviously, if they're a little bit into their functional medicine or functional health, that they might, let's say, come to you for that support. With that being said, why is birth control not always the answer?
Because it's like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. I don't know if I can say that, but essentially it's like putting a plaster over the engine light that's come on. It's just masking an underlying root cause, an underlying issue. And when you know yourself, if you go to an OBGYN or a gynecologist, you get like 20 minutes as an appointment. You go in, you tell them your signs and your symptoms, and 9 times out of 10, you're told take birth control.
But why? Why did they say that?
From my experience, it's conventional. It's based on the paperwork that they have. It's based on the bookwork that they've gone through, and they're treating numbers on a page. So they're treating a reference range.
Mm.
And they're not going into the root of the issue for a couple of reasons. One, I feel, is they don't have the time, nor do they care enough to go into that respectfully. When I work with my clients or with somebody like yourself, I care. I genuinely care. I care because it stemmed from my father. I care because it came from the likes of Marina, even Marina's dad. So I care about my clients. But when we go to a doctor, we're given an appointment slot. It's like 20 minutes. You go in, they go through a piece of paper, they'll go through your signs and symptoms, and they'll just prescribe the birth control. Why? Because it masks the underlying root cause, which they're not willing to go into.
But what happens if you're just masking the root cause and you're not addressing the root cause in the process to get back to full health?
So if you have a splinter in your hand and you put a plaster over the splinter, you've just put birth control over your symptoms. You then remove that plaster, the splinter's still present. Nothing's been fixed. You've never removed that splinter. So that Remove the splinter, you remove the pain.
Okay, there's going to be quite a lot of women that are listening to this that maybe are still on birth control or have been on birth control as a result of them not being happy with something. Take like 14-year-old me breaking out in like cystic acne, like to the point where I couldn't look in the mirror, my face was painful, went to the GP, combined pill. From the age of 14 for like 8-9 years, right? There's so many women that will be listening, whether it's their skin or whatever the hell it might be, painful periods, and they found themselves in this situation now where they're like, I don't think this is legit. Like, I don't think this is right. So how do they get to a position where they understand what's happening with their body and almost like reverse that?
So this is where it's going to hurt, right? And to your listeners, this is where it will hurt as well. 14-year-old you or 14-year-old one of your listeners, what was your diet like?
I mean, I grew up as a fat kid.
Right? So like, where does acne come from? Right?
Sugar, dairy,
yeah.
crap. Yeah.
Is there issues in their gut? Is there underlying issues?
Mm-hmm.
But then we just mask it with a pill. And the reason we do that is because people are not willing to step into what they're doing and fix that. They're not willing to go through that healing process. Even still to this day, if I get a 30-year-old female that comes to me and they say, these are my issues, this is what I was prescribed, how do I overcome this? And I give them the steps, they will still check in with me in a week or 2 time. And they will still tell me they had a McDonald's, a Jollibee's. But that's not going to that's not fixing the issue, because that's where it's stemming from.
I'd be scared to tell you that. I'd be like, Shane, I didn't listen.
It's like, so when we look at like adrenal dysfunction from the HPA, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, when we look at adrenal dysfunction, when we look at vagal tone dysfunction, when we look at stress, people love to live in this hormones of stress. They thrive on that. They wake up every day, they wake up to an alarm clock, stress. They go into their kitchen, they might not have coffee, stress, because it's not there. They might have the coffee, stress, driving adrenaline. Then they go about their day, more stress. Are they converting testosterone to estrogen correctly? Are they metabolizing estrogen correctly? Are they excreting it correctly? Have they got gut dysbiosis? Have they got a gut dysfunction where they're driving recirculating estrogen through specific enzymes? That's never looked at. Take a pill and you'll be okay. But it's never addressed the root cause.
Is there any further damage that is done when you take the pill? Like, you said, we're just going to take that plaster off the splinter. But if that splinter has been in there for 14 years, is it getting infected? Is there anything that is worsening? Or are we literally just concealing what the root cause is?
Cancer.
Wow.
Endometriosis. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. All of these things are stemming from the root cause. And we're not addressing that at a young age. And we're just putting a Band-Aid over it. And it only happens later on in life when people remove that Band-Aid, when they want to have kids. Look how apparent is IVF nowadays, IUIs.
Yep.
So apparent. But if people just address these things as kids, these things... One thing I always say is, if we go back to our ancestors, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, IVF wasn't a thing. IUIs weren't a thing. Procreation still took place. McDonald's wasn't around. Jollibee's wasn't around. Processed foods weren't around. People were eating fish. People were eating meats. People were hunting and gathering food. Procreation still took place. Nowadays, we have the noise. We have social media. We have the influence of other social media influencers or people of influence. And this drives even further dysbiosis in people's guts. One thing I do like about this Whoop band, as an example, is the fact that it vibrates. So there's no alarm clock. If we're getting stimulated at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning when we need to wake up by an alarm in our ear, do you think that's conducive? Or is that going to drive a stress response first thing in the morning?
It is the worst sound ever in the whole world,
right?
The iPhone alarm clock.
The horn, right? So that's the first thing, how we wake up in the morning. I'm not saying that people need to wake up to natural light. Like, we have to look at what's real as well, what people have available to them. If somebody has to wake up at 4 a.m. because they have to go to work or they have to travel to work, they can't wake up to natural light. They can get a Lumi lamp. That's one thing they can get. But still, I try not to create more stress or more issues in people's lives. I try and work with what they have for themselves or what they have present at home. But how you start your day is how your day is going to go. And if you start with stress and you start elevating cortisol and you start elevating adrenaline first thing in the morning, you start liberating stored glucose. When you start liberating stored glucose, you start elevating insulin. And that's what's driving the majority of these issues. Insulin is a storage, it's a growth hormone. And that's what drives the majority of these things. So if we can reverse that and just go in reverse, how do we wake up in the morning? What's our perception of life like when we wake up? Are we waking up to some sort of influence from the day before, from childhood trauma, from our past relationship? Like, how does that look like in the morning? If we can alter that, if we can alter our train of thought, one thing that we spoke about is when you leave your house in the morning, how many people are on the horn in the car, are getting triggered by other drivers?
I don't think you can ever be outside in Dubai and not hear horns all of the time.
It's constant, right?
All
And
the time.
from an energetic perspective, it costs our body energy to make energy. It costs our body energy to make ATP, to make that energy currency, the body. So why are we using it on other people? Why are we creating further stress in our life? People just live on autopilot all the time, and that drives further dysfunction.
So we reduce our stress because we become better at regulating emotions. We're sleeping more. Maybe we're being smarter about our caffeine intake. How does that then begin to reverse the dysregulation that's happening in the body? What is actually happening on like a biochemical level? What changes?
So if we go back, if we start from the level of, and I don't like to use this all the time because I don't want people to leave this podcast thinking, oh, insulin's a problem. It's not a problem. It's needed in life. Cortisol is also needed in life. If cortisol wasn't there, we'd be dead.
We would not wake up.
We would not wake up. All right. So people like to blame these things. But if we reverse that, we'll essentially just lower these things in the body. Once we lower these things in the body, then we're not going to be driving dysfunction. If we continually drive specific pathways in the body without going into too much depth, if we drive specific pathways all the time, if we drive on specific receptors in the body, specific receptor sites in the body, we create further dysfunction. All we need to do is reverse that, reverse engineer the process, and we lower that. Once we lower that, our body is in balance. Homeostasis. Balance.
Mm-hmm. So what happens from a nutrition aspect when you see things going wrong? Because if that is contributing to the female health conditions that some of your clients might be experiencing, what are they doing wrong with how they're eating that is causing them suffering? If you're enjoying this episode, then one thing that you need to know is getting into rooms with people who serve you to be better is one of the most important things that you can do in your life. And at this point in time, only 7.5% of the people that listen to this podcast are aiming to stay in the room by being subscribed to the 1 in a Million podcast. So do yourself a favor to be better, the best version of you that you can do, and do a good thing that's going to bring you good karma and hit subscribe.
That's a good question. It starts from the cephalic phase. The phase
The what?
Cephalic phase.
I'm like, I've never heard that before.
It starts from the cephalic phase when we think about food. So digestion starts at the thought of food.
Mm.
Doesn't start when food enters our mouth. Right? It starts when we think about food. That's when digestion starts. If we are stressed from that very same alarm clock first thing in the morning, we will down-regulate digestive processes in the body. If we look at what's a fundamental for survival, your heart is, your brain is, vital organs are to keep us alive. Digestion is not. When we're in a stress situation, our digestive processes will shut down. We are not, you know the phrase, you are what you eat. You are what you eat, what you absorb, and what you assimilate into your cells. Essentially, anything that we put in our mouth enters a tube that links our mouth to our bum. It's a tube. It goes from one end to the other. If we don't absorb that and assimilate that into cells, we are not getting the nutrients needed. We're not getting the cofactors needed to run enzymatic processes in the body.
Why might that absorption not be happening?
So if you look at stress, if we have heightened levels of stress, or if we have specific things happening in the body, for example, one thing is H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, which is a flagellum bacteria, which is present in over 50% of the population of the world. This can downregulate stomach acid production. Stomach acid is needed to convert a protein digesting enzyme called pepsinogen to pepsin. If stomach acid is not present or it's highly downregulated, we're not going to get that conversion taking place. Now we don't have an active form of a protein digesting enzyme. Stomach acid will also downstream signal to the pancreas that there's stuff coming down. We need to release enzymes. If we're not releasing enzymes and we're not breaking down food effectively, or we've got sluggish bile, we're not going to emulsify fats ready for lipase to break it down. If we don't absorb these things, we're going to end up deficient. That will drive further dysfunction. That stems from stress.
It's interesting how when you reverse everything, that it all links to stress being one of the key factors here. So is that the main driver of why women might be experiencing things like bloating, fatigue, feeling puffy in their midsections, or is that actually different? Are there other hormones that can come into play there?
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing that I want to clarify when we talk about stress is, what is stress? Is stress a bill at home? Is stress your spouse? Is stress your dog barking? Is stress having 3 or 4 kids in your house been like a hurricane? Like, what is stress? Stress is different to everybody, and how we perceive stress is different to everybody. So when we talk about stress, I'm never speaking about the fact that somebody may work a 9-to-5 corporate job and that's what they see as stress. Stress could be the cars on the road. Stress could be how they wake up in the morning. Stress could be the food they eat. Stress could be training induced stress. All of these have a massive part to play. So when we talk about stress, stress is one of the key drivers of dysfunction in the body. But I'm not talking about 9-to-5, Monday to Friday stress. I'm talking about everything outside of that. So to answer your question, stress is one of the key drivers of dysfunction, because from that very same stress, we're not going to digest and absorb and assimilate nutrients correctly. Is there other things that are there to play a part? Absolutely. We have an enzyme which is called beta-glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that will help, it's an enzyme which essentially will assist in the recirculation of estrogen in the body and inhibit its excretion. But where does beta-glucuronidase come from? It comes from the lack of absorption of foods. If we just reverse engineer all this, where does that come from? It can come from a bacteria, which I spoke about. But how did the bacteria get there? Was our immune system compromised? Why was our immune system compromised? Is that from stress? This is why my product doesn't sell to a lot of people, because they don't want to hear about the stress. But I don't talk about, as I say, the 9-to-5 corporate stress. I'm talking about all the stress that we place in our bodies and how we perceive things in life.
So I'm just going to rewind here for my recapping. So what we're saying is that the stress, which is not just your day-to-day work stress, but it's constantly like just being highly strung, feeling very much so in that fight or flight mode because of everything that you're dealing with. When you've got higher cortisol, that's then impacting your ability to be able to absorb nutrients. The lack of nutrient absorption can then lead to a cycle which actually causes estrogen dominance. And that then causes all these symptoms that some of us ladies are dealing with. And we just think, actually, let me take more exogenous hormones because the GP told me and that's going to fix everything. That's crazy.
That's essentially what's happening. And if we can just reverse engineer that, and as I always say to people, if we just go all the way back to those people, to our ancestors, what did they have? Did they have pills and potions and magical elixirs? No, they had food. There's 2 fundamental things we're meant to do in life. One is walk and one is climb. Hunt and gather food. How many people do you know that can climb? I certainly don't know many.
That's very true.
It's very true, right? How many people do we know walk every day and hit their 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day? There's a few, but there's also a lot that don't. And they're the 2 things we need to do in life, walk and climb. How many people do we know that can fully extend their arms directly over their head?
Oh,
Not a lot, right?
no.
Fully, directly over their head, without extending through their lower back. Not a lot. So these are the 2 things that we need to be able to do in life. And a lot of people end up with a dysfunction. Not necessarily gut related. This is on the level of the body.
So let's say someone's found themselves, like me, with a gut-related issue, inflammatory bowel disease, or maybe they've got a thyroid issue, Hashimoto's. How do we move forward with knowing for certainty, this is one thing that I've always wondered, that it definitely is that condition and it's not just an acute flare-up of their health being poor? Like how can we confirm that they have got this condition and it's not just they're dealing with some secondary symptoms of their health being dysregulated?
Yeah, so it's a good question. There's no specific answer here in the sense that it is directly related to like colonoscopies, endoscopies, specific blood tests, running antibodies. Like there's a lot of different testing that we can do, which is one question that I had for you directly, which was, I know I messaged you, asked you about an IBD, and you said that the doctor was confused or wasn't sure whether it was Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, which puzzles me because my next question to you on our call is, what blood tests were run?
Good question.
Right? It's a good question.
I don't know. I've
Because
got the medical records.
And this is the thing, right? And this is the answer I always get. It's either I don't know or I don't have the reports. And this is generally what happens. People don't get the reports. They take the doctor's word for it and they just run with it.
Yeah. It just puzzles me. Like it puzzles me completely because the amount of times that there will be clients that will come to me and say, oh, I've got suspected Hashimoto's, or I've got suspected celiac. And the questions are, what's being tested for and what confirms that? And is it just symptom history? Like a doctor might be like, oh, it seems like it's this thing. As you've said, you need to know what you're testing for. But to someone who's listening to this and is confused about their health, they think that they might have some kind of underlying health condition, or the doctor might have alluded to it. How can they be certain? How can they be certain what they've got?
So that's a good question. If you're okay with it, what I can do is for the listeners, if they want to reach out to me, drop me a message through my Instagram, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
I can just send them across like a quick kind of presentation on what they can have tested. And if they have any specific questions, I really don't mind just dropping them an answer in terms of what is it that I need to get tested, or if they suffer from something in particular that isn't in the little guide that I'll give them, then I'm more than happy just to be like, get X, Y, and Z tested on top of these, because the question's very broad, and what you would test for Hashimoto's or for Graves' disease is completely different to what you would get tested for, say, ulcerative colitis or Crohn's.
Yeah.
You know, so it is very broad, and there's no direct answer. But one thing I don't want to do is sit here and deliver loads of information and then people not be able to take anything away from it. So yeah, if it's okay, I'd be more than happy to share something with you.
Well, that is so freaking kind. So thank you. 100%. We'll leave that in the description box. But also, I think the most important thing here is for us to highlight, you go to someone who is an expert in understanding the details and cares, and is not just like Western medicine, let's assume that it's this, and not explain to you step by step and in detail why. I think that's what a lot of people are missing, is someone who's going to explain to them why we're testing for this and what this means, and that's what you can do. So thank you kindly for that.
That's a pleasure. I think I've experienced this many times. People get tests done. They're told they have irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, which we can touch on. They're told they have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Anything that we see with a syndrome at the end, is it really a diagnosable condition? IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, you've got bloating, you've got gas, you've got diarrhea, you've got pain, you've got IBS. What do I do? You're never really told, right? You've got polycystic ovarian syndrome. You've got cysts on your ovaries. I have a cyst on my lung. Nobody's told me I've got polycystic lung syndrome. Right? Like, these things are fact, right?
That's so true.
It's true. They're just labeled. They're terms that are just simply labeled.
And when you ask someone, how do you know that you've definitely got PCOS?
Yeah, of course. And are they going through the actual correct testing methods? The same thing, like my lung cysts were found on a CT scan that was done for an umbilical hernia that I had that just so happened to pick up my lung. But I was never told I had polycystic lung syndrome. People with IBS come to me all the time. They say they have IBS. I can see a question coming.
Yeah, I'm just, my cog is, you see the brain just turning, the cogs. My question now is, firstly, is this cyst benign? It's not harmful, you're okay?
Personally, I don't know. But as I always say, if we open the bonnet of a car and we go searching for stuff, we'll find stuff.
Wow, that's crazy. So I'm just shook, because like that goes to show, by actually having certain health checks that you hadn't even anticipated, you're revealing something. So there's a lot to be said here about when we've spoken about going and testing things. Like if you're testing for the right things and you know what you're looking for, that's probably going to reveal something great. But also having a comprehensive health check, this is just, I suppose, more reminders for people to do that, because it's something that I can imagine just gets completely dismissed by most people a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with the cyst on my lung, it's something that I know that's there now. I will monitor it. I don't want to sound very dismissive of it when I say if you look for stuff, you'll find it. But I know it's there. It doesn't cause me any problems. I've literally ran 3 sets of bloods every single year since 2018. I have all my reports sat in a Google Drive folder. I know exactly what's going on with my body from the perspective of bloods. Am I worried about the cyst? I know it's present. I'll keep monitoring it, but at least I know it's there. How many people go through life? They have no idea what's going on in their body. They end up with some dysfunction. They end up with a disease. And at that point, it might be a little too late.
It must provide you like a huge amount of confidence to know that you're that aware of your health. But if you're avoidant of something, then before you know it, not only are you building up anxiety, but actually it could be shooting yourself in the foot further down the line.
Yeah, for sure. And I always say to people as well, like, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. I do overtrain. I will completely admit that. I do undereat. I will completely admit that. We're not perfect, but I know how to correct it. And I know if there's something going on in my body, what to do to fix it. And I will always take those steps. As we spoke already, like about caffeine, as an example, every single year for 2 months in the year, I'll drop caffeine because I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. If I'm fully overtraining and undereating, I will stop because I'm aware of it. I'm conscious of it. I'm not living on autopilot every single day.
But it still puts that power into your hands to trust that you can recalibrate from doing those things, because actually if you weren't aware of your health, you would probably be playing with fire. We don't know. Maybe you shouldn't be doing any of those things, but obviously you're that aware of your health that it allows you a little bit of trust and gives you a little bit of wiggle room. And back to what we were talking about when it comes to PCOS, this is something that I definitely think we need to revisit, just because how many women believe that they have PCOS because of, like, I don't know, I found a chin hair or something along those lines. So why is that one of the most commonly misdiagnosed female health conditions or assumed female health conditions?
It's similar to the pill. Right? You go into an OBGYN, you go to a gynecologist, they run an ultrasound, they see something on the ultrasound and they say you've got polycystic ovarian syndrome. Have they checked specific markers? Have they checked your insulin? Have they checked testosterone? Have they checked DHEAs? Have they checked the actual hormone cascade prior to testosterone? Have they checked any of these blood markers? 9 times out of 10, when I speak to females, the answer is no. It's either no or I don't know. It's one of the other. And if you don't know, you probably should know. And if you do know and you're still in concern about it, talk to somebody who has an in-depth understanding on it. Because as we spoke about with the pill, it's very easy just to label something that's going on in the body and then plaster it.
Labeling whatever is going on in the body, plastering it with a pill, or just assuming that you've got certain hormonal imbalances is the number one reason for the ladies listening as to why they'll come to us and say that they're experiencing weight loss resistance. So if we were to put it into layman's terms, why could hormonal imbalances or birth control contraception be contributing to fat loss resistance, if at all?
One thing I always say is anybody that has gone through a period of starvation and has unfortunately passed on in life through the history books has not been overweight. It's just a fact, right?
That is a fact.
It's a fact. Weight loss resistance comes from what you put in your mouth.
I love.
It's a fact. If we go through the history books, anybody that was starved passed away, not overweight. If we look at what goes on nowadays, people will blame hormones, they will sit in silence, and they will go and feed. And it's just a fact. Now, it may come down to a slowdown of the metabolic rate, which we know. It may come down to, in females specifically, a lack of muscle mass out of fear that they'll get too bulky. And this lack of muscle mass or lean tissue on the body will drive the metabolic rate down. So then weight loss or weight loss resistance occurs. Now it gets to a stage where we have a female who's unfortunately a small, petite female who has a low basal metabolic rate, but they see everybody else around them eating a lot of food. So they feel it's appropriate for them to do the same thing. And they don't understand the caloric components of food or the energy equivalent of the food that they're eating. It's very simple to overeat. If your basal metabolic rate is 1100, 1200 calories, it's very easy to overeat. So is it weight loss resistance, or is it lack of education and awareness around food?
You heard it here first, folks. It's true. If you eat in a calorie deficit, no matter what health condition you have, no matter what's going on with your hormones, if you eat in a big enough deficit, you will use body fat as fuel.
100%. Because if we look at what happens when we consume something like a carbohydrate or a protein, fat is a little bit different here. But when we look at the insulin effects or the increase of insulin in response to proteins as well as carbohydrates, as insulin goes up, glucagon, which is a contrarregulatory hormone, goes down. We don't liberate stored energy at this moment. We store energy. If we're storing energy, we're obviously not breaking down energy. Weight loss doesn't occur. If we stay in a fasted period for long enough, and I'm not saying fast, I'm not saying intermittent fast, I'm not saying do fasted cardio, but if we are in a fasted or a prolonged fasted period and we allow insulin come down, the contrarregulatory hormone glucagon will elevate. We will drive something called AMPK, and we will initiate fat loss. We will initiate the breakdown or the liberation of stored energy. But if we snack, if we stress, these things can all drive insulin up. Cortisol is one thing. Nobody talks about the other part.
It will be a shock to certain women that are listening to this podcast to hear that actually they're just not eating in a big enough deficit. And I want to go back to what you mentioned about if your basal metabolic rate is 1100, 1200 calories as a small female. There is a narrative that certain thresholds or ranges of calories are unhealthy. But that's simply not the case if you are 5 foot and let's say you're 85, 90 kilos. You are just quite simply eating way above the calories that you need to maintain. But then to be in a deficit, it's going to be eventually pretty hard because of how little energy your body actually needs to function. Is there a way that you found is helpful to get your female clients to understand why this is not a bad thing, maybe to have their calories as low as they might need to be for them to lose the body fat to actually get to what would be a safer position? You know, they say, oh, it's dangerous to have my calories that low. It's actually dangerous to be significantly overweight and obese.
Yeah, it's a fact, right? So a very simple thing that we can look at is if we get somebody's body weight and we get somebody's fat mass or body fat percentage, and we subtract the two. So if we look at what's like a healthy range for a female in terms of body fat percentages, this can be completely argued. I've had females at 12% body fat doing photo shoots, which is very lean. I also have females that maintain 18 to 20% year round, which is healthy. So if we just look at 20% for a female being healthy, the differences between male and female, 20% for a female, we'd be talking say 15% or so for a male. Okay. So if we look at if we look at 20% for a female, and if we subtract 20% body fat from their body weight and get their lean body mass, do you think it's conducive to feed fat mass? No?
Not at all.
I ask my females this all the time. Is it conducive for us to feed your body fat? No. So why are we in caloric excess when we can feed your lean body mass? What's needed for you to stay alive? What's needed for you to build muscle? What's needed for you to be healthy? But people like to see food. People like to argue that they're on low calories so that they can consume more food. But if we get your body fat and we get your body weight and we subtract the two and we get your lean body mass, my question is it healthier to feed fat mass or lean body mass? And the answer is always lean body mass.
That's a very simple little equation that people can do there. Where would you say, or how would you go about accurately getting those measures? Because I know that it's not the easiest thing.
Yeah, it's also not very accurate no matter what way you look at it,
That's true.
unless we go into underwater testing. So it's a very good question, because I don't even like the likes of I don't want to use the names, but the scanners that you can get in pharmacies. A lot of these are very inaccurate. We've run them. Marina, she showed up with 50% body fat on one
What?
in a pharmacy.
50%?
50%.
No. Marina has abs.
Yeah, so this is why I don't like these scanners that we can see in like pharmacies. So you can do obviously skin fold tests with the calipers. You'd obviously need somebody trained on the calipers. The problem with the calipers is when we get an overweight individual, male or female, we're not taking skin folds. We're taking a large chunk of fat, which isn't accurate again. Then we can look at obviously things like DEXA scans, whether that's accessible to somebody. But to answer your question, we could simply look at photos and just get a ballpark figure.
Yeah.
Right? It's not rocket science. If we get a list of, you can just Google this. You could just Google, as you know, body fat percentages amongst females. You get a list of photos, see what range you're in. And if you really want to be like nice to yourself, just put yourself at a lower range based on the photos. And you'll still get an average ballpark figure. And then you can work from there. And as you know yourself, once you get that ballpark figure of the caloric allotment that you should be having every day, just measure, see what body weight you're at. And then just adjust the calories from there. But certainly eating low calories, if you've got a low basal metabolic rate and you're a small petite female, is not unhealthy, because it's definitely unhealthy being obese. It's definitely unhealthy having high cholesterol. It's definitely unhealthy having high blood pressure. It's not unhealthy eating lower calories at that moment acutely to get to your desired result.
Could you please let me know your thoughts on the statement, it is unhealthy to eat below my BMR, my basal metabolic rate?
My question is, what's anybody's basal metabolic rate, right? Like, nobody knows. I don't know my own, right? I've competed. I've done multiple photo shoots. I run a lot now. Like, I have zero idea what my basal metabolic rate is. But I definitely fuel myself now enough to keep myself healthy. And I know that based on my bloods. And that's why I run these things, right? So to give an example, if we look at specific blood markers, we can look at bilirubin. We can look at uric acid. So uric acid is known for gout, right? We can look at bilirubin, which is a marker you've got direct and indirect bilirubin. But both of these, as an example, are markers of stress in the body. They can be markers of oxidative stress, right? We can look at things like C-reactive protein. A good one for you is vitamin D. Vitamin D goes down in inflammation. If somebody's inflamed, they will not absorb vitamin D. It's a protective mechanism by the body. Vitamin D goes down. It doesn't need more calcium. So vitamin D goes down, right? So we can look at these things from a blood panel perspective and see how inflamed somebody's body is, just based on simple blood markers that's never spoken about. And from there, I would adjust. I can't remember where I was going with this answer, but it's from there that I would adjust my calories based on my basal metabolic rate that I don't actually know what it is.
Yeah.
Because we don't have an answer for that.
That's a very, very good point. The same thing essentially is like the equivalent of whether it's your basal metabolic rate, whether it's your like maintenance calories, all of these things are always kind of shifting, and we're never going to, like, it's always a range. But then also you have a fuck ton of body fat as a fuel reserve. Like, so how unhealthy can it be to eat in a deficit for a prolonged period of time?
Can we do something on camera?
Yeah.
So this is very easy, right? So think about it this way. How many calories is in a gram of fat?
9.
Okay. And how many calories is in a pound of muscle?
3,500.
3,500, right? In a pound of muscle. I said 3,500. And there's 9 calories in a gram of fat?
Yep.
Okay. So 9. If somebody has 30 kilos of fat on their body, how many calories have they got?
3,500 multiplied by 30 multiplied by 2.2, because a kilo is 2.2 pounds. Oh, you're making me do maths after a whole lot of podcasting and not enough caffeine today.
So if somebody has 30 kilos of fat, my maths is terrible. So, but this is interesting. We're going to have to cut this.
Okay. So 30 kilos.
So if somebody has 30 kilos of fat on their body, which is very plausible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very true.
Even to speak about myself, when I was at 100 kilos and I competed on stage at 70 kilos, that was 30 kilos I cut.
I lost 25 kilos.
I lost 25 kilos.
Yeah.
People have far more weight to lose than they ever think. How many people do you get that come to you and say, "Oh, I'd be happy with 5 kilos"?
Like, honey, well, for us as well, it's like, you said that you can just Google the body fat percentage charts. Like, we know for a woman at a certain height where she would be in a body weight range if she was lean. Like, we automatically detect that.
Yeah, for sure. But if we look at, to answer your question, which was about the calories and how much we can go down, and that we have a large energy reserve on our body. If 1 kilo of fat equals 7,700 calories, okay, is 1 kilo. If we have 30 kilos of fat, we've got 231,000 calories present on our body. You know how many calories we burn, generally speaking, in a marathon?
Like 2,000, 3,000?
Yeah, depending on the person, that's accurate. We'll just make it even better for the listeners. Say you burn 5,000 calories, okay?
In a marathon. How many marathons can you run on 30 kilos of fat?
You can essentially run 46 marathons fasted, essentially, right? Based on your fuel reserves. Yes, you would obviously need water, of course, right? You will lose glycogen as you're running. I'm not telling people to go run 46 marathons fasted, but that's essentially how much fat you have on your body that could get you through 46.2 marathons.
And aside from maybe having broken legs by the end of it, nothing bad is going to happen to your health, because it's actually worse to have 46 marathon fuel reserves on your body in excess.
Absolutely.
So some women might say, if my calories are too low for a prolonged period of time, and let's say they don't have an excess of body fat, or maybe they do have an excess of body fat to tap into, maybe they don't, but if my calories are too low for too long, then I lose my period. That's guaranteed to happen.
So maybe your listeners have never heard of something called RED-S. Have you heard of RED-S? So relative energy deficiency?
No.
So it's either relative energy deficiency syndrome or relative energy deficiency in sport. Okay. It is something that came about mainly off the back of dancers and horse riders and gymnasts, right? The reason being is because they're athletes that are weighed, right? So growing up as a female, specifically nowadays, with such an omnipresence of social media and influencers and bodies being posted, people have this ideal body in their mind. And they're also competing in something, or they're doing something like dancing, they're competing in something like gymnastics that is weighted. So they need to take their body weight. So when we look at relative energy deficiency, if you're consuming under 30 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day consistently, that is classified as clinical low energy availability. Okay.
Wow. So there's that specific definition.
Yeah. So if we look at like less than 30 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass, say, for example, we have a female that's 50 kilos, right? We're talking of fat-free mass, which essentially means this female is 65 kilos, 70 kilos, right?
That's me.
That's you, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at consistently for a prolonged period of time, you'd be looking at simply 1,500 calories. Now, if we have a female that comes to me and they're 50 kilos total body weight, and their fat-free mass is, it sounds ridiculous, but say their fat-free mass is 35 kilos fat-free mass, which is plausible for a small, petite female.
Absolutely.
Then we're looking at maximum 1,000 calories, right? So that's why we have to look at these things very, very specifically for an individual.
Okay.
And know the actual ranges when we talk about calories.
So what we're saying there is that's the amount of calories that if they ate for a prolonged period of time, that they would be in a state or a chronic state of low energy availability, which is where they then risk hypothalamic amenorrhea, these other conditions that will impact their health.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So that's the number of calories that they eat. That's not the deficit that they're in each day.
No, that's specifically if they were to consume that amount of calories for a prolonged period of time, they could end up with something like amenorrhea.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And there we've gone from one spectrum to the other, which is like how long can I go just tapping into my fuel reserve, however much body fat you have to lose, versus when are you playing with fire to cause some deleterious effects to your health. Many women also will have gone through the stages where maybe they've had irregular periods, they've lost their periods, and they're no longer using before we actually get onto that question, I'm just going to stop. And I'm going to say women who believe that they have a period when they are on birth control, can you explain why it's not a period?
Because they're on birth control. So it's synthetic hormones.
So that is a withdrawal bleed.
It's a withdrawal bleed. It's not a period. It's not a period bleed. It's a withdrawal bleed. It's a pill bleed.
It's a fake period.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm. So to any females that think that they're having a period or like their period hasn't arrived, if you're on hormonal birth control, it's not a period. But if you're not on hormonal birth control or you're coming off of it, and let's say you're having irregular periods, you're missing periods, this is not positive. This is a sign for concern. What should their first port of call be in order to resolve this and get a regular cycle?
So the first thing I would say is just run your labs.
Mm-hmm.
I would run your labs through probably more somebody on the functional medicine side as opposed to conventional medicine, because naturally speaking, if you go to conventional medicine and you run a set of labs on the back of coming off a pill, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be told that your hormones are off. You need to go back on the pill. That's generally what happens.
Don't go for the plaster.
Remove the plaster. So yes, this is generally what happens, and you know yourself, you see it time and time again. So I would be looking more towards the functional side. Having your lab markers run, it's very hard when you run a set of bloods for female specific hormones when you have no idea where your period is going to be or when it's going to be. So trying to time specific things like estrogen or progesterone or luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone is very difficult, but it will certainly give you a baseline of somewhere to start. Now, the one thing I want a lot of females to consider is if they run a set of bloods post-pill, don't jump onto supplements straight away without understanding those labs. Because I see this time and time again. People will try and drive progesterone up with specific supplements without considering they might have gut dysbiosis or gut dysfunction, and they're actually recirculating estrogen and not excreting it. The progesterone might not actually be low. It might be low relative to their estrogen.
So progesterone is not guaranteed to be low in certain situations, but relative to estrogen. So you want that ratio. That's very important.
Yeah, you want the ratio between estrogen and progesterone, which is difficult to get post-pill if you don't know when your period is, or if you don't have a period for that matter. If we look at progesterone, and the majority of progesterone, like a male has progesterone as well. We get it from the adrenals. Females get it from the adrenals. This is why I said at the start of the podcast, just understanding physiology is how I can understand female hormones. Because as a male, we have estrogen. We also have estrogen and we have progesterone. But as a female, the majority of your progesterone is coming after ovulation from the corpus luteum.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't ovulate, obviously your progesterone is going to be low. So it's hard to time these things post-pill, but it's definitely plausible. And I would say if every female, once they come off the pill, should be running labs consistently.
How soon afterwards and how frequently?
I knew that was the next question. How frequently? I don't have an answer. It's based on your availability, the availability of the labs. It's based on an individual's budget, what they have to put towards blood markers in Dubai. It's very easy to run bloods, as you know.
Yeah.
But in terms of when, I would be looking at within 30 days after coming off the pill, because naturally looking at a female cycle, you're talking 28 days on average. So I would run it after the initial kind of 28 to 30 days, and then we'd be running it from there.
Okay. That's really helpful. And then from that point onwards, let's say gut dysbiosis is something that needs to be addressed, and we're not jumping on supplements that are going to conceal whatever is happening. Again, so many things that we're just slapping plasters on things, hoping that it solves the problem when we don't understand the root cause. Why might gut dysbiosis be an issue? And then also, what will that influence in terms of our female hormones?
So it's a good question, and the reason I like these questions is because when I think about these things, I get all the cogs are turning, right? So when we look at gut dysbiosis, as I said, we have certain enzymes that will initiate the recirculation of certain hormones and certain things in the body, xenobiotics as well as hormones. It's not just hormones, it's toxins as well. So if we look at the one specific one, which I said was beta glucuronidase, which we can see on a stool analysis test, if that is elevated, then the probability of the individual recirculating estrogen is high. Now, we can also look at methylation issues in the body, where if somebody doesn't methylate correctly, they're not going to excrete estrogen via the what's called the 2-hydroxy pathway in the body. They could be pushing estrogen down separate pathways, which are genotoxic, right? So once you come off birth control, making sure that you test correctly is paramount to the individual's health long term. Specifically for females that I have had come to me who have been on birth control since they're 14 or 15 years of age and they're now 30 years of age.
For those who don't understand what genotoxic means,
It's essentially, to make it easy, toxic to your genes, to your gene expression.
and that leads to.
Cancer.
So this is really fucking important. Like really important. If you've had years and years on birth control, if you've been using it to just, hide symptoms, if you don't know why your cycle is irregular, what's happening, do you have PCOS, is your gut okay? Like figure that out, because it could be brewing to a life-risking health condition further in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the times when we see a lot of these issues long term, they are stemmed from when we're kids. And it's not always nutritionally related, don't get me wrong. I know we talk a lot about nutrition, we talk a lot about stress, but we have the environment as well. And I think the environment that we put ourselves in drives a lot of our stress. But the unfortunate reality is we can't change our entire environment. We can change the environment, i.e. the people that we're around, the place that we live. But if your job has you in a certain place in life, like you cannot change that environment, i.e. the place you live in terms of the country that you live in. You can certainly move out of that job. You can certainly move out of that office. But, it's not reality for everybody. So we can change certain things in our life. We can change our nutritional habits. We can change our exercise habits. We cannot always change our environment. And unfortunately, these things can drive issues in the body as well.
Shane, you have blown so many minds today. You've blown mine. And there's so much important guidance there. And you've broken down some very complex topics and made it very simple. So thank you. Where can the listeners go and find you? And also, I'll put the resources that you mentioned in the description box, but what's your social media? Where can they find you?
It's just my name, just Shane, Shane, Seery, Seery. You can get me on Instagram there. I've got 2 accounts, so it's just my name is my main account that I use today. You can drop me a message. I'm more than happy to answer a couple of questions if any of your listeners want to ping them across to me.
Thank you so much. I will leave everything in the description box. And if there's one takeaway, it's go and understand what the hell is happening in your body. And if you need Shane's help, you know where to find him.
Thanks so much, Millie.
If you found that episode helpful, then you definitely need to go and listen to episode number 7, the biggest fat loss mistakes you're making and how to fix them. It's going to be an absolute game changer for you.